Good morning. My name is Princess Dipuo. I'm the president of the South African Royal Kingdoms Organization. Today, I'm just going to recap to what we have been doing from the first episode to date. And I need to talk to specifically kings and queens, chiefs, traditional leadership, and the communities of South Africa. This program is actually dedicated to them. Before we go any further, we always make a disclaimer that in this program, we want people that are willing to research, people that are open-minded, people that are willing to look at the truth for what it is, people that are going to move from their standpoints and look at another way, which might be the way. First of all, we call this program Going Back to Your Roots. And the slogan is, only a fool can buy vegetables from their own garden. The reason why we're saying back to your roots, it's because we want to show South Africans and their traditional leaders in particular that we have lost our way. If you look at social media, you find non-South Africans in the majority talking about issues of South Africa, not particularly caring about the history of South Africa, not the history that we were taught in our schools, not the history that is distorted, because the history that we are being taught at our school is very distorted up until to the higher education systems. Our educational system has been designed by Europeans, and it has been designed to make sure that we continue to think that Europeans are the ones that brought civilization into Africa. I would like you to go and read a book called The Destruction of African Civilization. That book is written by Dr. Chancellor Williams. Dr. Chancellor Williams actually did a research for 16 years in Africa. He went to different tribes, different countries across South Africa, interviewing people and getting the history from an African perspective, not a European perspective. Let us be clear. The system, educational system, is designed to keep the black child or the African child. We're not black. The African child under an illusion that an African child is inferior, is a subordinate, it's a slave. That is the whole system is designed to do that. I'm going to play videos that are going to be showing that. What prompted me to actually do this program, it's a video that I saw on YouTube. Well, the first one I saw where it was an interview between two European guys talking. This other one was saying, no, black people are not indigenous people of South Africa. I saw that video, which I'm going to play for you in this program. And I kind of thought, no, here we are, propaganda again. But when I saw this African woman from one of the African countries, because I don't follow her, someone sent it to me, and she was quoting that video and trying to say, South Africans, there you are being told that you're not indigenous people of South Africa, and you're quiet. And you keep saying, leave us with our South Africa and all that. Because remember, I have said when you look at the social media, a lot of people that are talking about South African issues are not South Africans. And they do not care to research the proper history of South Africa. Remember, during the apartheid era, South African was a closed book. If South Africans that grew up at the time that I grew up have passports, if they do have them, and their passport are stamped, it will either they were going to Botswana or Swaziland or Lesotho or Namibia. They don't even know the history of South Africa prior to 1994. What they know is the history that was written. It's the history that people talk about. But they don't really understand the actual life that South Africans lived before 1994. They really don't understand. They do not understand the psychological wounds that South Africans are carrying. They don't understand the type of lifestyles that South Africans were living during the apartheid era. They don't really understand. Because when you look at the people that are busy talking on social media, you look at their age group, you can tell that these people are young. They're not elderly people. So they probably started knowing South Africa and visiting South Africa post-1994. And they are talking from a perspective of neo-colonization. But they don't really understand the mental issues that South Africans have, the trauma that the South Africans have incurred during the apartheid era. They don't really understand. And they don't really know the history. That is why I'm saying, please go and read the book by Dr. Chancellor. Now, if you look at our episodes, what we have been trying to do in this series of Going Back to Your Roots is to show that civilization actually started here in the sub-Saharan Africa. In episode 6, I have shown the research of the mitochondrial Eve, where they have done a research that shows that civilization actually started in the southern of Africa.
The study of mitochondrial genes has picked up pace a lot in the recent times, leading to the famous discovery of the mitochondrial Eve. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mitochondrial what? The use of the word Eve in mitochondrial Eve is actually some sort of misnomer. By studying the genomes of more than 1,200 indigenous people living in the southern part of Africa today, the team pieced together the lineage of one of the oldest DNA lineage to date, a collection of genes called L0, which is passed down maternally through the mitochondria, has survived remarkably unchanged for hundreds of thousands of years. By tracking where the L2 lineage first split, the researchers believed that they may have pinpointed precisely where the first carrier of the L0 mitochondrial gene might have lived for thousands of years. The L0 mitochondrial genome is particularly important because all living people with this particular genome are believed to have descended from their maternal lineage from a woman who first carried this sequence. This hypothetical woman is what was called the mitochondrial Eve. The L0 lineage is now predominantly found in the Khoisan people who are indigenous to the southern part of Africa. Numerous other indigenous Africans have also been shown to carry the mitochondrial DNA that descends from this lineage, but with a subtle variation. By comparing these variations from group to group, geneticists can piece together a general timeline of when these ancient genetic lineages diverged. The dataset acquired in this recent research created one of the most accurate snapshots ever taken of how ancient mitochondrial lineages are dispersed around southern Africa. This distribution data allowed the team to estimate where and when mitochondrial mitochondrial Eve's descendants first split into genetically distinct groups. The author, Vanessa Hayes, a geneticist from the Govan Institute of Genetic Research in the University of Sydney, said that scientists have known that humans originated in Africa roughly 200,000 years ago. But what hadn't been figured out until this research was done is where the exact homeland was.
What was exciting about this paper is that we could use the mitogenome and the L0 lineage in particular to trace our human ancestors back to what is possibly the birthplace of mankind. So what our genomic data showed us is our ancestors appear to have lived and thrived for 70,000 years in a region without any need to explore further. This region we believe to be the Makgari-Okavanga region, which spans most of Botswana today.
Now, if you look at our episodes, what we have been trying to do in this series of Going Back to Your Roots is to show that civilization actually started here in the sub-Saharan Africa. In episode 6, I have shown the research of the Mitochondrial Eve, where they have done a research that shows that civilization actually started in the southern of Africa.
Black people are not the original inhabitants of South Africa, which, in fact, they're realizing that now. When they claimed that they owned all the land, the original inhabitants, of whom there are not many left, said, excuse me, we were the original inhabitants, you guys were migrants here as well, which they were. Okay, the original inhabitants of southern Africa are called the Khoisan. In the west, the Bushmen are Khoisan. Hottentots are Khoisan. But you can't use those words anymore, you now have to call them Khoisan, okay? All right, now, and they were the inhabitants of the whole of southern Africa. So the whole of South Africa, at one stage, were Khoisan. The black people originated in what is now Cameroon. That's where they...
Hold on, Khoisan aren't black?
No.
What are they?
They're a completely separate ethnicity all on their own. In fact, if you look at them, they're kind of yellowy. They're a light brown yellow color,
right.
But they look more Asian than African. They do not consider themselves African.
Interesting.
When the white guys arrive in Cape Town, so 1652 is when Dutch guys arrived there. At that stage, you could have divided South Africa almost exactly 50-50, what's now South Africa. The western half of the country was entirely Khoisan. There were no black people there. None at all. Only Khoisan. So we're Cape Towners, all that area, Khoisan people. The northern part of the country did have black people. They'd started arriving, and they were still migrating.
How long have they been there in the northern?
Well, it's a moot point, and people have debated it. It would seem that black people had probably started arriving in the northern parts of South Africa maybe 1,000 years, something like that, about 1,000 years before whites got there, right up in the north, okay? And they've been slowly moving south because it's an empty space. I mean, one of the things about Africa is it's very empty. Up until the 1950s, Africa was very empty. It's the population exploded because white colonists, the naughty white colonists, put hospitals there, and there's been this huge population explosion since the 1950s. But Africa was really very empty up until then. And so tribes moved around and just occupied new empty territory. So the guys coming down from the north, who called the Bantus, it's called the Bantu expansions, when black people came out of the Cameroons, they'd been occupying South Africa and moving systematically south, down the east coast
They were
of South Africa.
pastoralists, am I right?
Yeah, they were pastoralists, yeah. Whereas the Khoisan were hunter-gatherers. They were like aboriginals, okay, so they hadn't become pastoralists yet. The black guys are migrating down from the north and settling, doing exactly what white guys are doing. So white guys, the Dutch guys from Cape Town, were settling by moving eastwards. So the white guys are moving from Cape Town eastwards, and the black guys are moving down from the north. And they met at a place called the Fish River, which is now in the middle of South Africa, at a place called, it's still called Border. Everybody in South Africa calls that part of the country the border, even though there's no border there at all anymore. But there was a river called the Fish River, which is where blacks and whites first encountered each other. And then it started 100 years of warfare between whites and the Xhosa, who were the tribe that they met there. So, okay, so at that point, that would have been in about 1700. So whites and blacks first encountered each other in 1700. Okay? So whites had already been there for 100 years at that point.
What I love about the Nguni tribe is that when you talk to their traditional leaders, their kings and everything, they acknowledge that they came to South Africa from either North or Northeast or Central Africa. They acknowledge that. All the Nguni tribe, they acknowledge that. And when you look at the destruction of African civilization by Dr. Chancellor, it actually shows how the migrations happened in Africa and how the Nguni tribe ended here in the southern part of Africa. However, at that time, there were what we call the Bushmen. They were here because there is nothing called Khoisan. There is no Khoisan because I can hear this white guy talking about the Khoisan. There is no Khoisan. Khoisan is an abbreviation. During the first Khoi War of 1659, when the ambassador then, or the governor, I don't know what they call them, was writing to his leaders in Holland when the San people started fighting, he actually used an abbreviation and said Khoi San. K stands for Kap, H stands for Holland, O stands for orientated, I stand for indigenous, meaning the Kap Holland orientated indigenous people. Holland indigenous people. And the San is the Southern African natives. So there is no tribe called Khoisan. There is nothing like that. So you can see, even from the interview, there's a distortion from the naming. So we need to correct some of these things. And we need to stop because we can see that our government is perpetuating some of the distortion. Maybe because they themselves do not understand history, because we put people in government just because someone is charismatic and they can talk, and we take them and we put them there and we never know what are their qualifications. And we don't even know what are their capacities. Just because this person can talk loud and when he talks, people can hear him, we already think that this person is a leader. That is the caliber of leadership that we have in South Africa. Now, maybe they themselves do not even know our history. That is why they are endorsing things that are non-existent. When you go into those tribes, there are many tribes. You have the Korana, the Kam, the Bushmen. You know, I'm not going to use the word Hottentot because it's an ugly name, but that's what they were called in those days. Now they changed it to hunter-gatherers. And if you look at the research that I've shown in our episode 6 of the Mitochondrial Eve, it shows that we come from there. And let us call a spade a spade. Europeans are diasporas. They are European diasporas in Africa. Why is it that when we move out of the continent of Africa, we are labeled diasporas? It's even a slogan now. They're talking about Africa and its diaspora. We need to start saying Europe and its diaspora. Every European that is on the African continent, it's a European diaspora. They can never be indigenous people of Africa. Asians are Asian diasporas. We need to start using those concepts the same way that is being used to us, that we are African diasporas. They themselves are European diasporas. They are Asian diasporas. They are not indigenous people of Africa. Now, it doesn't matter whether the Nguni tribe came from North or Central Africa. It matters not. They are Africans. The people that are diasporas are European and Asian and American, all those continents. They are diasporas when they come here in Africa. And we need to put that into a proper perspective and stop being politically correct and saying, no, they are Europeans, they are Caucasians. No, they are diaspora. The same way they call us diaspora outside of Africa. Libona, they are diaspora. Because if we start labeling things correctly, then we can start putting things into perspective. Because this picture is distorted and we kind of beating about the bush and we don't want to face it directly. So we can't continue on this journey. We cannot. South Africans in particular, do yourself a favor. Because it is true, South Africans do not read. And those that read, they actually are following a European educational system. Those that went to universities know very well. Even when you're a lecturer, you can hear that this guy, when you did anthropology like I did, and psychology and social and sociology, when they are talking there, these professors, you can hear that this is not true. But you must write that for you to pass. Because if you were to write the truth there, you're going to fail. So some of us had to write what they are teaching us, knowing that it's not true, for purposes of passing. But once you've passed and you've gotten that degree, because unfortunately for us as Africans, we have to have these papers. We have to have these qualifications. You are not recognized unless if you are a doctor or a professor. That is the only time when your knowledge will be recognized or your word will be heard. Because first of all, your credentials becomes important. So for you to get those credentials, which most often are based on an education that was in a European education that you know deep down in your heart is not true. But now that you've gotten those, maybe it's time to start telling the truth. To calling a spade, because they cannot take them back. You are qualified. They gave you the certificates. They can't come back and say you failed. So tell the truth. Tell your truth as an African child. And traditional leaders, you are custodians of culture. You have the culture that your elders, through oral history, have given you. You have in your archives the truth. It's about time that you start telling it. It's about time that you stop this thing of following behind politicians and pastors and preachers and baruti, and start taking your position as traditional leaders. Because we have shown in our episodes that Christianity is our way of living. We just didn't call it Christianity. But these diasporas, European diasporas, when they came into Africa and they realized that we didn't write, they started writing and they distorted Christianity. What we have today is actually Christendom because it's political. We are spiritual beings. And kings know that better than any other person. Because they know what happens. They have a clear understanding. You know, if you are a true heir to the throne, you know you do have a connection with the Creator. Because you are supposed to lead His people. And it's about time that you start telling it like it is. And stop following the money. Because now traditional leaders are following the money. They are not being traditional leaders. They are either being turned into Christendom or they're turned into political individuals. But they're not traditional leaders anymore. And we need to stop this thing. Because the land was taken from kings and their communities. The first war, the Khoi War of 1659, was launched by kings and their communities. The last war of 1906, the Mbambata Rebellion, was the king of the Zulus with their communities. So kings have been fighting for land from the time settlers settled in South Africa. And today settlers have a nerve of telling Africans that they are not indigenous people of South Africa. And our African brothers over the river and sisters over the river, because they're not overseas, they're over the river. Our sisters and brothers over the river, they are now mocking us. They now think they know better than us. And you know why is that? Because we are too quiet. Those that know the truth, they are quiet about the truth. Those that do not know, they are just quiet. And everybody is just having a ball. They are passing the ball from one person to the other. And South Africans are dead quiet. Our government is now agreeing with some of them. We have seen on social media our president, our current president, President Cyril Ramaphosa, when we are saying we don't want foreigners to own businesses, because the legislature clearly states that if you are a foreigner, and when we talk about foreigners, guys, we are talking about the European diasporas, Asian diasporas, all those diasporas that come from continents out of South Africa, they are foreigners. Let us be clear. They are foreigners. Some of them, I've spoken about them on episode 3. They created a religion called Calvinism. They are claiming that they are from the tribe, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, and they were given this land by God because they are the chosen people. This land, South Africa. There they are in Orania. The grandson of Verwoerd, the architecture of apartheid, bought the land with 1 million in 1991. So you can imagine he didn't buy, he just took the land. The 1 million probably was for the transfer costs and all the costs that were involved in transferring the land to the Orania. Because they are the chosen people. They even created a church called the Dutch Reformed Church. And you find South Africans being members of the Dutch Reformed Church, proudly so, and holding up the Bible. Yet this is your enslaver. It's the person that enslaving your mind. We need to break away from those chains. We really need to. We need to start reading. We need to start researching. We need to go back to our roots, because now we are being sold vegetables from our own garden. A person comes and learns civilization from you and then goes and write it down and distort it and come and sell it to you, and you buy it and you live with it. And you don't want to hear anything about it. You don't even want to change. You don't even want to be open-minded about it, to say maybe this could be wrong. No, you don't want to do that. So let us be clear. You know, in the 6th episode, I've even shown that our intelligence, it's sitting at level 9. Mitochondrial Eve, all the evidence. In episode 4, I have shown that the Hebrews are black people. Black people from Southern Africa. Right at Okavango, where they found the mitochondrial Eve. Evidence is out there. Ignorance is not bliss at this time of technology. It's not. And there is evidence. There is research that has been done. We have the cradle of humankind here in Gauteng that shows that the oldest fossils are more than 300,000 years old. Here in South Africa. Yet you find a European diaspora saying no, Africans are not indigenous people of South Africa. What a nerve. Really? And he could say that. Because maybe he himself doesn't even research. He's not even aware of the research. Or if he's aware of the research, it's a deliberate distortion of history. Because when you listen to this white guy, when he says Africans came and in the northern, he's talking about the Nguni tribe. He's talking about the Nguni tribe. He has forgotten about the Sutus that were here. He doesn't even mention them. At least he mentions the Bushmen. But there were Sutus here. Remember, Sutu, Tswana, Pedi comes from one tree, royal tree. They were here. And the Nguni tribe, when you talk to their kings, they acknowledge all of them. I've gone around, I've interviewed them. Because I'm a researcher. I do not talk something that I did not research. I do not talk a hearsay. I go out there with my cameras and I sit down, I interview people, I research. The Nguni tribe acknowledge that they come from north, northeast, northwest Africa. But here in the southern part, you found Basutus and the Bushmen. Now, I don't know what this white guy is talking about. I really don't. I really don't. Just because our constitution says South Africa belongs to all those who live in it, doesn't give them the right to think that they are indigenous people of South Africa. No, they don't. It doesn't. And when it says it belongs, it doesn't mean the land is yours. No, that's not what it means. We must decode this constitution. We really must decode the constitution. Because if you are on my land, I can give you a list. They stole the land. They are land stealers. Where in the world have you seen minorities sitting on 87% of the land? Foreigners sitting on 87% of the land. And the indigenous people are occupying 13%. Where have you seen that? It's only in South Africa. Only in South Africa. And they intelligently came up with a constitution. This constitution, we need to ban it because it's serving white people. White people continue to burn the flags, the new flags. They ban it and they raise their old apartheid flag. It's time that Africans ban the Constitution of South Africa. Because the constitutions, you'll never see a white man banning the constitution. Every time where there's an issue, they're quickly to run to the constitution because it protects them. You'll never see them banning it, but you'll see them banning the flag. It's time that we ban the constitution because this very constitution that people are hiding behind is the one that is creating our problems. And we are in the majority. We have the power. We are the people that vote. We are the people that put them where they are. If we choose to vote differently, this whole thing collapses. Because the power lies with us. But it's up to us to change our mindset. It is up to us to start being truthful to ourselves. It is up to us to look at what is really happening in South Africa. When the Muslims, the Arabs, when they started colonizing Africa, they started by researching. They would send in spies to come and see and learn our way of living. And then they start moving in. Slowly. And you know what they do? They sleep with African women, create a generation, have babies, and then those babies actually associate with the fathers, not with the mothers, African mothers. After 20, 25 years, when those children are now old, they start to come together with their fathers and they start fighting the natives, the African natives. That is exactly what has happened in South Africa. When they started coming in from 1994, they came alone, men, few of them. They researched. They started sleeping with our sisters. Today, the mothers of their children, the grandmothers of their children are the ones that are defending them and helping them to fight us. This is the strategy that they have been using for years. It's not a new strategy. They've used it for donkey years. Because we do not learn, because we do not research, because there is this thing that if you want to hide something from an African person, hide it in a book because they don't read. We need to change that mindset. Because the European diasporas are actually operating on our ignorance. They know we don't know. That is why they so boldly do what they do. Because they know we don't know. It's time that we start knowing. It's time that we start researching and reading and getting to the truth. And acting from a perspective of truth. I just wanted to make this video for today because I just felt that when I saw this video from this lady, I started thinking to say, you know, it's like we are dummies, you know. It's like South Africans are dummies. It's like our traditional leaders have accepted the situation and they're saying, no, it's fine. Let them do whatever they want with us. Now, if the traditional leaders, the only job of a king or a queen or a traditional leader, the only job is to take care of their community. That's the only job, nothing else. If your traditional leader is not taking care of you, start taking things into your own hands because he or she is not doing her job. We cannot continue this way. We cannot. The situation is getting out of hand. It really is. And now that we are talking about land, everyone is now going to kings. All the political people, the politicians are now making friends with kings and promising them things and giving them money, and they are following the money. Now I'm saying to the community, the power is in your hands. I'm going to say this in Sotho. Morena ha jwetse setjhaba. Setjhaba se jwetsa morena. Morena o utlwa ka setjhaba. It's not the other way around. Morena o utlwa ka setjhaba. A king doesn't make decisions by himself. A king is actually a servant of the community. The community tells the king. Not the king telling the community, no. The community tells the king. So it's about time that communities start telling their kings that they're not saving them and they take it upon their hands. If that has to be. If our kings are not going to serve us when they are our servants, we will serve ourselves. The African structure of kingdoms, there is democracy in the African kingdoms. If a king is not doing what he's supposed to do, we dethrone him. We dethrone him as the community. So I think the communities must begin to think along those lines and start questioning their traditional leaders. And those that follow politicians, ask your leaders, leader, where are you leading me to? Because we never ask that question. We never ask our leaders, leader, where are you leading me to? We just follow blindly. That is why we find ourselves where we are today. Because we follow blindly. It's about time we start questioning. We must question our pastors. We must question our kings. We must question our political leaders. We must question everyone that is saying they are our leaders. They must tell us where they are leading us to. So that if we don't want to go there, we just don't follow them. Let us not follow blindly. Let us not follow blindly. And to our African brothers and sisters across the river, please, when you talk about South Africa, please begin by understanding the psychological healing that South Africans need, understand the history during apartheid time, understand the lifestyle that South Africans lived during the apartheid time. Then, when you have made that research and you have a clear understanding, you can have an opinion. Because most of your opinions that you have are misguided. You clearly show that you do not have an understanding of what was happening in South Africa before 1994. You would do yourself a good favor by understanding those dynamics, particularly the mental, psychological impact that apartheid had and the lifestyles that South Africans lived during those years. It will do you a good favor because you, brothers and sisters over the river, you never lived like us. You didn't. We don't have slums here. We never had slums. We never had slums. We never sold in the streets. We had shops. Every location had shops. This thing of selling in the street, we didn't know as South Africans. We didn't. In South Africa, during the apartheid era, every household between 7:30 in the morning and 2:30 in the afternoon, that household was locked. The doors were locked because the parents went to work and the children went to school. There was no one in the streets. No one would be in the streets selling or doing anything. Just go back and check how we lived. So that when you start labeling us and calling us names and calling us lazy and all these things that you're calling us, when you start doing that, at least you understand where we come from. We got our independence much, much later. Some of you started getting your independence as early as 1960, when we got ours in 1994. Now you can understand that how long we have been closed in. I have said my age group, if they have a passport and if it's stamped, it will be Lesotho, Swaziland, Namibia, Botswana, because they've got relatives there. I think these borders are artificial. We didn't have these borders. So our families are across, the southern part of Africa. So you would stamp when you go to your family. Those that have passports. The majority don't even have passports. So when you start talking to us, please try and understand us first before you judge us. Thank you very much. Thank you and goodbye.